a second. Alrighty. So in terms of WordPress news and events, I guess there's a couple of things. If you've been paying attention, suddenly, if you got the emails from your hosting provider or so otherwise, actually quite a few releases in WordPress releases in the past 2 weeks, I believe. I think most of these have come out in the past couple of weeks or so. So it started with 6.9.2, which was primarily security focused. And then apparently there's some bugs and issues in that one. So 6.9.3, and then shortly on its heels, 6.9.4 came out to hopefully address all those. And I know there's a whole side discussion around um, implications of this and quality control and things like that. So anyway, hopefully at this point, most people are at 6.9.4. I did not experience this, maybe because I got just lucky and the bug and the security fixes patched the bug, but it sounds like the bug that a lot of people got was this a blank screen bug. I don't know, Peter, if you heard of that or if you saw it yourself.
Yeah, I didn't see anything, and I didn't look at the details to say what set of circumstances needed to happen, but it happened enough where it was quickly after like three hit that four hit. So, they were well aware of the implications.
Yeah, and it's a little bit frightening because usually these point releases are ones that most, especially security related ones, are ones that most people say, oh yeah, just go ahead and install it. In this
Yeah.
case, yeah, there were some issues there. So, which kind of brings us to the next big lurking thing right around the corner, believe it or not, April 9th. WordPress 7.0 is targeted for. It's out in beta right now. So if you're using either the Gutenberg plugin, again, don't do this on a live site of yours or an important site, or you can go to Playground, so the Playground environment, and you can test it out there. But this is the one we've been talking about for a while. A couple of years back, we haven't showed that roadmap picture in quite a bit, but the WordPress roadmap going back for the past couple of years, we're in this phase now after the block editor and full site editing and that kind of stuff. We're in this phase of real-time collaboration is sort of the buzz around this one. So a lot of we've seen some of this get integrated in 6.9. That was the notes feature. But a lot of this thing about it's like Google Docs type functionality is really what's the big part of, not the only part, but a big part of 7.0. So, it sounds like I haven't been following this that much. I think we can go off on hours on this, but maybe we'll save it for next month. But, having worked on applications and software systems in the past that had to do data syncing, it's not an easy thing. There's a lot of issues you can get in terms of keeping data in sync. So sounds like it's been a bit, I don't know if I say rocky, but little things I've read sounds like there have been some bumps along the way. So we'll see, we'll see what kind of happens for April 9th. But then the other thing probably we'll spend more time on if we cover this actually next month. I think that'll be good timing then, Peter, I think before our next meetup. We'll probably cover more things about like any new blocks or block improvements, and also the menu navigation designer, which is kind of based on or integrated from the Ollie theme. To me, that's probably be the more interesting thing. So, anything else, Peter, that you can think of for 7.0 to mention now, or
Yeah, I mean the tying in with AI and the focus on that came in at the end of kind of the development cycle has been really interesting. A lot of that coming from Matt Mullenweg, and then yeah, what we're going to see with collaboration. What one of the things that threw me was I was happy when I heard that it was going to be turned off by default. So you had to opt into all of the collaboration stuff, and then something I heard this morning says no, it's now they've decided it's going to be on and you have to opt out. So there's an interesting scramble towards the end of this where I think beta 4 release candidate 1 is coming very quickly. That might be one of the reasons why the 6.9.1.2.3.4 happened the way they did, because they've been
yeah,
focusing a lot on what's coming in on 7.0, because there's been a lot promised with what this next phase is. So
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see. I've been playing with the beta. It's
I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, I'll probably try it soon, definitely before April
yeah.
9th. So just, again, from the counter argument, I do, again, this one you can find the regular WordPress core blog, but the repository news site does have a good opinion article. I definitely recommend people read about it, sort of a counter factual
Oh yeah,
to 7.0. I thought it was a lot of good points in here. And again,
a
I don't
lot of
want to be the,
yeah, a lot of great points.
a lot I agree with. So,
Yeah, 100%. And I had a conversation with somebody who was involved with the release team and has a lot to do with the communication of the source of truth, they call it, and all. And my thing was, I've been asking for this for the last bunch of versions, is when a new release comes out, I would love to see something that clarifies what's in a classic theme and what's in a block theme.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that would be a good idea. I think it's just falling on deaf ears because Core
Yeah.
is focused on block themes and the rest of the world is using classic themes. So
Yeah.
that continues to be an interesting challenge there.
So we'll see. We'll see what comes up with
We'll see.
7.0. But tool tip, Peter, you got
Yep,
anything for us
I
this
do.
month?
Yeah. Let me share screen share. Okay, so, and I'll show you a little bit about the make. You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, there's a couple of things that are not the main tool or tip, but I did want to briefly say before I close this, the WordPress kind of tools to play with. Telex is one where you could do some AI block development. What's gotten really interesting is where they're going with like a new version of Playground that's causing a lot of confusion. Ray, I will put it out there that I think, and maybe I'll do it, is a whole session just on Playground. And then this new tool that's a version, it's called my.wordpress.net. The difference being that the Playground is now going to have information that stays persistent with you. But other than that, it feels like the same thing. There's a lot of folks who are thinking about, well, wait a minute, that is the same thing. So that'll be interesting to see. The one I wanted to show you, because I'm kind of weirdly involved in it, is, excuse me, is plugins and the featured tab now for when you add plugins and what that is, and where it's coming from. When you go to add a plugin, there is you get these tabs. Featured is a new tab, and there's some interesting things, and I do want to share a little bit of kind of like behind the scenes stuff on where the discussions come in, because I'm intrigued by this, and I've made direct comments to the people who are developing on this. For one thing, the recommended tab has the exact same content now as the featured, and the featured is the big new thing that they're introducing. Originally, what the recommended tab, it was supposed to take into account what you had. I'm going to admit, Sue, what you had already on, what your site was, basically, and what plugins you might. So it was supposed to be a little bit more dynamic, like, hey, this is recommended. These plugins should fit for you. Apparently, it's never worked well, but it was one of those things that became less visible or apparent. Like we all kind of just skipped over it because it felt like it was the same plugins all the time. Like it had Jetpack and the usual suspects. So interestingly, recommended is, but featured, even though recommended as of now is mirroring featured. Featured is a new tab, and what this tab is 8 new plugins that right now are human curated. There's a guy named Nick Hams who has done some kind of interesting things, controversial to some, about like stirring up the pot about how to make WordPress more interesting. But this is one of the things that is out there with as a new project that got Matt Mullenweg's approval to say, yeah, go do it. So right now this is hand curated. He's hoping to change it every 2 weeks to look at, and there's criteria that says, right now the criteria is plugins that are 1 year old, have less than 10,000 installs, and for whatever reason, appear to be really useful or intriguing. So this is handpicked. That's already a question. Like I said, it should be 3 years, under 10,000, recently updated, because there's a lot of great plugins that are old but that nobody has seen because they get buried and pushed down because of all the things that rise to the top. The flip side is, of course, you can look at some of these and go, well, do I really need something, right? design set go is it, and this is again a person picked this. It's curated to go in here, but we have to assume that at the very least these are interesting and have some quality about them because again they've been picked. So they've been recommended and they've been picked. So when you're looking at plugins, or maybe when you've got a trial a playground site or something like that, and you want to say what are these new things, um, like the slider block with Gutenberg, the G slider. I've used that. I don't like sliders, but I want, and that's a really good plugin because it makes a slider that uses blocks. So there's a logic to it where you're just designing like you always do, and you just say, okay, this is slide one, this is slide two, and it moves through. So as of this set of featured plugins, that was one of the ones that you picked. I'm going to show you one very, very quick thing, which is on the behind the scenes thing. This is the conversations that happen around building a WordPress, which happen on something called Slack. And there's the Slack group called Featured Plugins is now based on anybody who joins this has something to say. And there's been a lot of discussion about what should you be, can you possibly have it curated by a person, or should it be automated and things like that. And I'm part of this conversation because one, it's a very small group of people who are commenting on it, and two, it's kind of interesting to see, what they're saying and all. But this is the behind the scenes thing. This is like, when you think about what core is, this is all the conversation about core. Don't need to go into it.
But this is how the sausage is being made. I don't want to see it.
This is literally the sausage factory, the goop on the floor, and everything in between. So, but I just wanted to make sure that
that's
we had
interesting. Yeah, I never noticed that.
It's brand new, like
okay.
2 weeks ago it launched, and I heard it because of a podcast. I don't think I've heard it anywhere else directly, but yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Now, at least that's something maybe we can look at in the future to see what's been added to the featured plugins.
Exactly. Maybe it's the tool or tip might be, well, let's try in one of them.
It is kind of funny. Some of this goes counter to our advice over the years about look for things that number of installs have like a certain age to them.
Well, there was one that I was going to feature that is like another one that's less than 10 installs, but I really like what they're doing. So I'll probably make that next week. And I stand by that because the admin, the ASE plugin, I think I introduced that way at the beginning where it did not have many installs at all, and now it's one of the more popular ones out there. And did you hit record? I wasn't sure if you did or not.
Yes, I did. Yep.
Okay. All right. Yep. I didn't see the notes pop up. So I will stop my share.
Sure. All right. Very cool. Good to know. Yeah, it's funny. Those kind of behind the scenes things, they don't really advertise them. And usually when I go to that page of ad, I'm not searching. It's a terrible search interface. I'm usually I know what I want.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's absolutely terrible, and that's why at least something like this, I would love to see work going more and more into. I think AI is going to be a part of the plugin search at some point. That's what the plugins website uses AI.
Yeah, you showed me that one. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's jump into our topic, which again is just to set the stage a bit. This is a vast topic, and we're not going to cover nearly everything in it. And as we were saying, if folks maybe joined a little bit late too, a lot of this is just personal experience between myself and definitely Peter jump in. But I want to hear from everyone else too. If you've had things that you learned the hard way over time, or things we've missed, or different types of sites too. I think Bob has worked on like a multi-site. This is not touching multi-site. I'm not really talking much about even WooCommerce, e-commerce sites. So every site, that's one thing. It's always hard to give this kind of advice because sites are very different depending on functionality. But just to kind of keep it general, there's probably the biggest, at least for me, most recently, the biggest change in terms of my launch process. So let me define term again, if anyone's really new. When I say launching a site, so let's say you built a site, and we'll talk in the segment about where you could have built a site. You built a WordPress site, and now you're ready for it to go live. That's what launching, fancy name really means. It's ready to go out there in the world. So one of the biggest factors in terms of our discussion today is whether if this is a brand new site, it's not replacing anything, so completely brand new. That's going to be a slightly different and slightly easier launch process than if you're replacing an existing site. So I've mentioned, I think, a couple times the past few months, that's sort of what I've been doing most recently is replacing an old legacy site. So I'm going to kind of use that as my fresh in my mind example. And then there's also sort of a divergence of hosting we'll talk about in a second too. So the new site that you're building, if it's on this, there's a couple places, and this is a whole side discussion too in the future about how to build sites before you're ready to launch. We'll save that for if people are interested, maybe even for a summer thing. So, you can build a site before you're ready to launch on, let's say, some existing hosting. So if I'm replacing a site, I can create a subdomain on there. So I have something tucked off to the side. You can use staging. I know that, Peter, that's a topic we talked about, maybe discussing in the future.
Mhm.
You can use what I did, my example, or my most recent one is I had completely new hosting, so completely different host, web hosting. So I had to create a temporary domain as I was building it, or you can build completely local. And that's, again, probably a topic for the future. So there's all these ways that depending on how you've built the site, now when you launch it, that's going to cause some additional complications or factors to consider because, where are you going to launch it to? That's this next piece here, where are you going to host it? So let's say you're replacing an existing site. So that's one set of considerations we'll talk about today. Or if you're going to completely new, let's say you're staying on some new hosting, but you're just getting rid of the old site in the case of a replacement, that's going to be a slightly different set of considerations. So a lot of what I'm going to probably talk about today is probably be the worst case scenario, just to go through that and then we can reel it back. So the one I worked on most recently was I was replacing an existing old HTML site. It was on a hosting that I wanted nothing to do with for many reasons, old, terrible hosting. So I was building this site in WordPress on new hosting. I happen to be using SiteGround, but that doesn't matter so much in this discussion. We're keeping the domain, and I'll talk through some more considerations as we go through. So to me, that's kind of one of the big forks in the road around this process. Now we'll talk about a couple more things of what to do next. Peter, can you think of any other scenario besides the new versus replacing existing? I can't think of anything kind of in between. I mean,
New versus replacing. A lot of times there's changing a host.
yeah.
That often is tied with some tweaking of a site, because somebody's paying attention to a site that they hadn't before. Cleaning up part of a site that changes it based on it being built on an old platform that needs to be updated.
I can't think of site. Yeah, I was going to throw in, like, in most cases, you don't want to change the domain. So let's say you're building a new
Right.
site. That one, let's the other big assumption, maybe it should have been stated, is you're keeping in a replacement situation, you're keeping the old domain. Because if you're creating a new domain, for all intents and purposes, you're creating a new site, at least in my mind and mind of SEO.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so let me keep going through this. Oh, Gene, go ahead.
Yeah, we can.
So what are you doing when you say you're using a temporary domain? What is a temporary domain?
Right. So for
Like
SiteGround, for example, in the plan that I have, the hosting plan, so I'm on their Go Geek plan, I can create basically unlimited number of sites on there. That's usually the demo sites I have created. When I create a site, it asks you in SiteGround to say, hey, do you want to use an existing domain? Like you already have a domain from GoDaddy or for SiteGround, whatever, or are you just building this temporarily? So it'll give you a temporary domain.
So if I'm going to be hosting on a redesigned site, it's a current site now, redesigning it.
Yeah.
Now I do have a SiteGround account for myself. Would I develop the new thing on my account, or would I open a new SiteGround account for the client?
No, we'll talk about handover later. So what I did in this situation was I created it on my account. So at this point,
Okay.
when you're building it, it doesn't matter so much. The handover handover does matter. So yeah, I'll cover that a little bit because that affects where will the site be hosted after launch. So it's kind of buried in there. But in this particular case, because they're going to remain under my hosting, so I'm keeping it on
Yeah.
SiteGround. But yeah, that's a good
So
question.
so when you say you're keeping it under your account, so it's going to be your Go Geek account, and
Yep,
then that domain is going to be under your
yep, yeah, because I already have.
umbrella?
Yeah, a lot
Okay.
of people, a lot of people host. I think Peter, I don't know if you do as much anymore. I don't do it for a lot of clients. A lot of times I do want that separation. Like what I used to do in the past, I would say I probably was more of a purist when I started. I really wanted everyone to have their own hosting. I was like, I'll help you set up the
Yeah.
SiteGround. I'll help you do this. But over time, between learning that from a professional standpoint, I don't know about others, I'd love to hear your experience. The money's in the maintenance, the money's not in the building so much. So having that maintenance contract, it just makes life easier in terms of I know the hosting, I have immediate access. If they want to leave me, no tears are shed. I'm like, here's the keys. I'll migrate your site for you. But I tend to keep not every client. It's certain clients. If I know things are going to be easy, I'll keep them on my hosting.
Yeah. Now
Okay.
I tend to set it up where I use hosting. I recommend hosting that allows me to be a collaborator. So I do have it set up by them, and so that they handle all the billing and they're responsible for all the billing. But as collaborator, I have complete control over all the technical things. And then if you use like you Flywheel I still use for things. It's great managed hosting, and then and Cloudways is another thing where I use where yeah you can set up sites with that generic name, right? So
Yeah.
whatever the default name is, and then when you launch, that gets into some of the things that we're going to talk about. We're making sure that what you were testing is so they might have often they have a website running if it's like a complete redesign, like it's running on whatever they're selling their Bluehost or GoDaddy or whatever account, and I might develop on a new site. So part of this is transferring over, but still being able to make something under sort of this generic name and at some point applying that domain to it is one of the things that affects the launch of a site.
And before Sue, I see you, I'll call you in a second. But yeah, this is one of those discussions, just kind of quickly on this, that definitely has to happen early in advance too. So the whole setup, that's not even here too, but that's part of it too. If yeah, making that decision of if they're going to have their own hosting and you're moving to there before you're launching the site, that's got to be super clear. Go ahead, Sue, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Gene, if you're hosting at SiteGround, they should give you what might be called a staging account, where you can duplicate the site kind of underneath the site
Not
and do all
all.
your,
Yes,
I'm
Sue, I
sorry?
don't think all levels of SiteGround come with a staging account. That's one of the issues too. If they have the cheapest level of SiteGround, I don't believe that comes with a
Okay.
staging. Yeah.
If
Well,
if it's your account, that's one thing. If it's the client's account, then they may have a better level. We do all ours on a different server. So they all have the word dev in them, and dev lets you use certain plugins for free because it's not a real site. So if you're building a lot of sites, I agree with what Ray said, which is get yourself a better hosting account, host them on your server or your account, and then you can do all kinds of things inside them. But if you're doing them on a separate server or even locally, then pay attention to the rest of this hour because it's all going to be about how to launch
yeah.
it.
And one last thing to
Yeah.
even what Peter said, that even again, it varies by hosting provider too. So a lot of this is, going to differ, but SiteGround, from I recall too, because I have a couple of clients who've set up themselves on their own SiteGround accounts, I cannot be a collaborator on their accounts because they're set up at the lowest level. SiteGround doesn't let me be a collaborator. I can do it for if people are Go Geek or higher, but there's certain things that you got to pay for to get more access. So
Yeah. Because I do have the Go Geek and I have unlimited sites, and my plan was to put all my clients under that umbrella. And I mentioned that at one meetup, and people were like, "No, don't do that. Then you're
It's,
gonna
you
be
know,
responsible for them." And I was just sort of, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that
it's
ruined my whole
yeah,
plan. My whole
yeah.
plan was that."
I would say we can definitely circle back. That's more of a
Okay, so
yeah. It used to be a bit of a holy war at times, but I've kind of gone both ways on that. So, but definitely one key thing, regardless of where the hosting is. Again, I'm sticking with kind of the harder one. So if you're replacing an existing site, although even if you're creating something new, one key thing before you actually launch is double check that you have all the correct credentials and access. So in my
Yeah.
case, I was replacing an existing site. Double check that I have access to without needing anyone else's, to call anyone else in the middle of the night or whatever, or in a panic. I had access to the hosting. It wasn't a double two-factor authentication. I have to bug somebody. I can get to myself. I could get to the domain settings and FTP. We talked about this before. If all goes wrong, you want two ways into the site to be able to access things. So it's
Yeah.
get those credentials and test out that you can access them. So you don't want this to be one of the last minute things like, oh, shoot, I don't have access to
Yeah.
network solutions or whatever else you need.
Yeah. Now, before we leave this in,
Mhm.
because you mentioned, knowing something way before. The flip side of that, though, and something that I kind of employ more often, is with the power of WordPress and the flexibility that we have. I can if it's a new site, well, even if it's like, I will clone a site onto one of my servers, change what I need, or start from fresh, and then I can migrate it to anywhere back up to where they are, depending on, like, I use a tool, I'll put the link in, called Migrate Guru, which, one of the things that's really nice about a tool like Migrate Guru that we'll talk about, a checkpoint is replacing links that you might have that have the other URL name in it. And what's nice about some of these tools, even the flywheel, when you're uploading and stuff like that, do a lot of this automatically. You still need
that's in here. Yeah.
Yeah, you still need to check, but you aren't limited to, you're not frozen if you know that, okay, you know what, with this one, I'm just going to build it on my development server. I'm going to build it in local on my PC. You can do all that and then upload it to whatever, then, migrate it or whatever.
You're right. That's the nice happy path one of, just do it all through WordPress. I would say the bumpy road ones, and even the happy path, things break. It's still the FTP and other things too. So again, so kind of pre-launch, other planning stuff, email, email, the headache that is email. So it's really important to know where are the email if they're using email, where are their email accounts? So again, I'm saying they. So a lot of cases too, if you're building your own personal site, some of the stuff probably doesn't apply as much and you have more flexibility. But let's say you're building this for somebody else, a nonprofit, a paid client, unpaid, whatever it is. Depending where the email is hosted, ideally it's an external service. Like maybe they're using Gmail, G Suite, Office 365, et cetera, as their email. So what that means is on the hosting service, hosting provider, whether it's SiteGround or Bluehost or whatever, um, you don't have any individual mailboxes built there. But that is not, I see that quite a bit because people don't want to pay for Gmail or G Suite, whatever. So a lot of people, clients will still ask to have email addresses built on their hosting. Again, good, bad, whatever. It's life. That does happen. So knowing that is going to affect your launch because we'll talk a little bit later. If you're switching hosting, you need to keep some things in mind. I'll keep going through this, and again, Peter, jump in. And I'm not going to touch on every single thing, but this is kind of Gene touched upon this already. It's the ownership, really having a discussion early on, post launch ownership. So let's say licenses. If you have paid plugins, a paid theme, let's say Divi or Elementor or stuff like that. And this is one that's funny. You ask different people, different people answer, developers and WordPress people differently. Who pays for those things? Well, you bundle into the maintenance, or you do this, you do that, you shut them off, blah blah blah, all those kind of things. But there's no right answer. I think just the summary, but make sure that you have something that you and the client have agreed to on that. And that also includes these real, especially these days. I mean, the obvious ones are hosting, domain, the yearly domain registration. But now there's a lot more sneaky ones out there like Google, good old Google Cloud. I get this over the past couple of years. Once Google Maps, if you're a heavy enough user of Google Maps, that Google Maps API now, you need to set it up with a billing credit card.
Yep.
Maybe it never gets charged, but whose card? Whose card do you want to use? Yours or theirs? So get that kind of ironed out. And then just these other ones are just sort of like real basic post things. So again, if this is for you, you are the maintenance, you are the warranty. But let's say you're doing this for a client or a friend or nonprofit. It's like, what are those expectations? How long are you giving free warranty service for? Then when do you start charging people? Or is it a maintenance contract, et cetera, et cetera? So that's
So
anything.
Greg, can
Go ahead. Sure.
jump in real quick? This is a really interesting thing that I've seen with website development over the years. In fact, there's a product that the Tab Group, I got the link somewhere, where they made something out of this where you could buy it, but you can also nowadays figure out how to make it or even use ChatGPT, which is, they call it the website owner's manual. Now, one of the ways that they use it is a marketing tool. And I think this is a very, very important thing that is one of the launch steps that gets missed, which is exactly what you're describing, having all of that stuff documented. The web owner's manual is all about not only keeping track of that, but even using it as a tool to say, okay, client, I can hand this over. Look at this scary document of all the things that you are now responsible for, or you can buy my maintenance program if you're somebody who is doing it. As a person, if you're somebody who's building the site for yourself, it's still very smart to have that document so that you can keep track of everything, because there's a lot of little things that all of a sudden something else changes and you're going, wait a minute, now I have to reverse engineer everything, as opposed to, oh, well, my DNS settings are here with this host, here's how I access it, so on and so forth. Or, I've got premium plugins or lifetime plugins, or, what are your licenses to the tools that you have and when do they renew? And all of a sudden something happens on your site because your credit card expired. You didn't get the notice that says that there's an issue, and all of a sudden now your license is not being renewed. So,
and this is one of those things where I can see why a lot of people, especially if you're coming from, let's say, a Shopify or Squarespace world, you don't think about this, because what you get, in Squarespace or Shopify, for the most part, not entirely, is you get it all. You don't have to worry about all this other this stuff. Hosting is Squarespace, hosting is Wix, So, but these are the power you get of WordPress means you do get this complexity. So if we do get time at the end too, I'll be curious or people put into the chat. The other thing is like, okay, let's say you do hand this off to your client. You want to hand off that post-launch thing. How do you actually do that? I mean, I've done it embarrassingly many low-tech ways, but just curious for others again. Excel, things like that. But and then here's just the other one too, the launch itself. What is a launch? I mean, it sounds all exciting, but it depends. If this is your site, your personal site, launch it whenever you want. Nobody will know, nobody will care. But if you're doing this for an existing business, a nonprofit, et cetera, you need to kind of plan a window around this. So having come from a corporate, corporate IT world, I never want to go back to that world of launches. Launches were weekend long, painful things, middle of the night kind of launches, because we had critical systems. Yeah, for the most part, hopefully you're not, working on, you're not here if you're working on those kind of WordPress sites, but do expect some downtime. If things go bad, hopefully everything goes well. If things go bad, you need to do this at a time where it's not disruptive. Make sure everyone's aware of it. Again, that contact info, all that kind of stuff. And then, I hate to say it, people talk about backup. Your backup is only as good as your restore. Have you just your restore? So it's like, what's your fallback plan? What if it all goes to hell? Can you fall back? What do you do? So things, again, not to terrify, but thinking about this ahead of time, it'll make you feel better. Even if you plan it, never execute your fallback plan, knowing that you have one is certainly worth the effort.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you cover this a little bit in more detail, but what you just said, the thing about backups is make a backup of the old site, make a backup of the new site, and make sure that you can actually restore that backup. Because it is possible, like, oh, I got the backup, and then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, it didn't work, or I don't know how to do, or whatever.
And that's a whole, I know that's another topic that we've talked about too, Peter, of like the backup and restore thing, because that becomes an issue sometimes. Like, okay, restore it to where? Let's say I
Exactly.
do a backup. You can't restore it to the existing site because basically that's another launch. But it's like,
Yeah.
so that even a backup and restore test has its own issues and its own complexity too. But yeah, I do cover backups, I think, a little bit in here as
Good.
well.
Okay. All right.
So, okay, so that's all the planning, the paperwork, all that stuff. Now let's get to the actual technology. Now, and I'm sorry, some of the stuff, if you joined us late too, this is a little hard to demo. We usually do a lot of demo stuff. I don't want to put this into slides. We may take this, if it's valuable enough to people, tell me in the chat. I mean, I'm happy to share this as a PDF. We can put this on our website. We haven't put anything there in a while,
Yeah.
but
We
anyway,
have it. And Ray, after you do this section here, I'll show other tools that might
right,
be.
right. So we
But
can
let's do it
combine
as
them
a
all.
section. Yeah.
Our multiple checklists. I mean, ChatGPT
Exactly.
is great, but this was all written by humans. This is me. This is
Yep.
blood, sweat, and tears. I promise of how I did this. But just some other kind of quick pre-launch things. Okay, you're ready to launch, and this could be stuff that you do weeks ahead of time or whenever. But at some point, if you've been building a site, you probably have lots of stuff that you can clean up. Post revisions is probably the one that I kind of always forget about. They don't. It's not that they take up a lot of space, but I like a nice clean site if I'm going to launch it. So the tool that I use, I'm curious others use something different, is WP Optimize. So this is it can
I've
do a
heard of
lot
it.
of things, super powerful.
Yeah.
I don't think I have it installed on the site right now, but when you install it, one of the options you can do is run a database cleanup. And oh, here we go. It cleans your database. But one of the options you can do as part of that is you can remove um, versions. And the word escaped me for a second. You can remove any like post revisions. Again, it's what does it matter that you have this post revision from a month ago and you're changing a page 100 times? You kind of want to start with a clean slate just to make life a bit easier. Um, so that post revisions, any placeholder content, hopefully at this point you're ready to launch. You don't have any other placeholders, but
Yep.
double check. Temporary plugins, I happen to do, there's a lot of plugins I'll install to make my life easier, like duplicate page or post. I use
Right.
that everywhere. Should you leave it there when you're done? WP Optimize. When you're done with it, get rid of it. Don't leave it there, or maybe use File Manager because it was easy. It gave you something quick to do. Get rid of it once you're done with it. If there were things that you use just to build the site, it's safer to get rid of them. And why it's less plugins to maintain.
Yep. Absolutely.
In,
Yeah.
in user roles too, it's another one too. So again, at this point, you've probably been the only person building the site, maybe others you've added. Make sure that all the right people are there that need to be there beside yourself, or remove others who don't need to be there. Any other like cleanup stuff you can think of, Peter, before we get to like SEO? And I know you're going to cover accessibility, which I totally forgot about. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that plugins, making sure that if you have a plugin that's active and all of a sudden you realize you're not using it for anything, is just that's an opportunity, because a lot of stuff can happen during the development time where you put a lot of things in there. Looking at your media library and going, oh, by the way, I started by bringing in a demo site, or one of the tools that says, oh, pre-build a site. Now I have all of those images in my library that was from the demo to build the thing that I don't need anymore. And not only does it clean it up, but it helps remove confusion going forward. Like, why do we have this image and where does it go to, and things like that. It's like, oh, that's a leftover from the build process. So
That's a really good one. Yeah, because I tend to do that a lot too.
yep.
I gotta go back to the site I just built, and I was pretty good about it. But you're right, especially when you're playing around with layouts. It's like, oh, do I want
Oh
it to be
yeah.
landscape? Let me crop it more. And this, I probably had like 4 versions. I do try to remember to delete things. I also put on the site I just built, I put Filebird on there just because
Well,
I wanted some separate. So at least that forced me to kind of categorize everything.
yep.
So it's
Yeah, I use happy files. So yeah, that type of kind of keeping on track of what you used and what you didn't use, which could also, by the way, include, and this happens a lot, um, pages, variations of pages.
Mhm.
we did our about us this way. It's not a revision like you've edited, but you literally created a different design,
old version, or
old version. Then all of a sudden you go in there and go, why do I have 5 about us type pages? And that's where you look at, well, nothing is linking. This is just dead space. One thing that I do sometimes, if I'm not sure, if you delete a page, it goes in the trash, and then you should empty the trash. So it's kind of there anyway. Another thing that sometimes
it is a space saving too, as I'm thinking about this. Yeah. If you do that approach, like you were saying, Peter, or I did a lot of all-in-one WP migration, so you're going to back up the new site and then use that to import it to overlay the existing site. Well, you don't want to download, all these extra images and things that you don't need. It's like, just make that process easier too.
Yeah. Especially with the redesigned site, and you realize you have gigabytes of many years old data that isn't shown anywhere. That's one of that in a redesign, but using a lot of the same content, that can be one of the hardest things. Then certain tools I use to do some of the media cleanup, but that can be a lot of time.
Well, speaking of pains of replacing an existing site, let's jump into SEO prep. So this was it's the last site. I've done a worse one, but this last one had quite a bit. So again, I was replacing an old HTML site that had a particular, let's say, complicated structure. One might say unnecessarily complicated structure, and I was rebuilding in WordPress. In many cases, I was creating one page to replace 5, 6, 10 pages, just for various reasons. But one of the things you do need to consider, though, is from an SEO perspective, I didn't want to break too many links. So I'll talk about that later. That there were some deliberate choices of things that I was okay with, but in general, I didn't want a bunch of broken links, 404 errors for people. So the tool that I still tend to use on smaller sites is Screaming Frog. I think we've talked about it a bit before. Oops, hold on a second. I got to get my window here. It's down here somewhere. Oh, move the zoom. So this one's good. The free version allows you to do up to 500. If you have a fairly small site, you can run this tool. What you basically do is you point it to a website. It takes a little while. The free version will give you 500 free. You can also do a temporary. Sometimes, if you're a cheapskate like myself, you may just do the temporary one for 30 days, try that out, get your information, decide if you want to purchase it or not. Really valuable if you're doing a lot of SEO. I don't do that much, deep SEO these days, or if ever. But it's a great, powerful tool. I'd love to hear if there's free versions to do something similar. But the thought was, I ran this against the old website. I pulled down the list of content that I was interested in creating redirections for, and then I'll show you what I did with it. So just if you run this tool, what you're going to get is basically a crawl of the site, as if it was a Google crawler or Bing crawler or whatever. So what that means is every accessible link on that site will show up in this list, including some stuff that I'm not going to create redirections for. So for example, CSS, minified JavaScript, images, everything you can think of that really is accessible on the site. What I was concerned about, though, was specifically the content that I was migrating over. So in this template, and I'll tell you a second about where I got this template from. In this template, before I migrated the site, so I exported the contents of that Screaming Frog run, the crawl, and I imported it into, it exports it as a CSV file. And then I created an Excel spreadsheet out of that. And that was my column A. So this is my old before. Column B, this is where you've got to use some judgment. And depending on how many of these you have, I had 300 something, which wasn't actually that bad, 360 of them. You have to decide, or somebody has to decide, where do I want this to go to now? Some of them are going to be one for one. Like in some cases, I don't know, there's a few of them where it was a blog article, for example, and I just created as a direct WordPress page, but it no longer has the .html. It has, the WordPress structure. In some of them, like I said, I got rid of the entire page, or I consolidated them into something. So what do I want to do? Some of them I want them to go to the new consolidated page. Some of them I want to go elsewhere. They had duplicate pages. I'm like, I need to pick a place. So this is sort of the tedious part. Doing in Excel, you can copy, paste, and do that kind of stuff. So that's column B. So column A is where did, the old URL, B is the new, and then it's like, what do you want? What do you want the HTTP code to be? So like, do you want it to do a redirect? 30, that's what a 301 is. That's a permanent redirect. And this is yes. So this whole format though came from the tool that I was using to do the import, which is I'm using SEO. I have the pro version SEO Press, but the redirection plugin, I believe, also has
Yep.
a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, put the link in.
And so it'll give you, like, you can download a sample of this. So it's like, it'll tell you the first column is the URL to match without the domain name. Second one is where you want it to go to, all this kind of stuff. It's not super complicated. It's tedious.
Yeah.
It's tedious. And even having done this, again, to kind of cut to chases, even having done 360 of them, once I was done, we'll talk about the post launch, I still missed some things were still missing.
Yeah.
And that's for various reasons. I can cover that a little bit later. Some of them are things I deliberately did not want to do redirects for. So I'm covering them on a case-by-case basis. But anyway, this is really only if you're replacing an existing site. If you're creating a brand new site, you're lucky.
It's all new links. Yeah. And in case we didn't say, this is so for a couple of reasons. The simplest one is somebody looks for something on Google, they click on it, it knows where to redirect to the right page, and then Google knows how to index it and so on and so forth. Or if somebody has saved a link or things like that. If we're lucky enough to have a website that has that many bookmarks and stuff on it, but that idea that it's like, oh, they would have, you don't want them to go to the 404 page, and you don't want to necessarily, although there have been times when this is used, the default, which is like all misses go to 404. I mean, go to homepage.
That is another, that is another way you can do it too, is at the host level, you can create everything goes to a page, but I think a SiteGround, if I recall, no, I think SiteGround, it's an all or nothing. It's like, I think it's at any 404, you can set up a rule at the host level, which is a bit ugly, but
Well, I've seen things done. In fact, I can't remember if I did it, which was going to having, if the redirect was a 1-for-1, say you're doing a redesign, it kind of goes. Anything that was amiss would go to a page that says, we've recently redesigned our website. Some of our links don't work. Here's an extended sitemap, or here's the search box. So
which
kind of like
my 404. So Cadence, the default 404. I think I'll show you on this site real quick. So I'll find something that doesn't match. This is the one I finished. So let's say gibberish. So the default 404 page is actually not bad. Again, you could restyle this in case the default, oh, can't find it. You want to search. Okay. It's not too bad of a place to land, but ultimately you want a better user experience. So you don't want people necessarily going to this if possible. So the other thing too is if you were building a site locally or wherever, most likely, hopefully you've had the discouraged search engines from indexing the site. Don't forget to turn this off. So where this setting is in, oops, there's my paste. Under settings, reading, I think it is. Yeah, reading is this guy. So these are our demo sites, or at least mine. I always check this off. I don't want any search engines. This is also not a guarantee from everything I understand. This is more of a gentleman's agreement to say it won't search. But just make sure you turn this off before you do submit. Because actually, Screaming Frog abides by this. So if I ran Screaming Frog against this site, Screaming Frog would say no, nothing found, because at the site level it's turned off.
Yeah. Let me talk about that real quick, which is a number of the SEO tools will make that, if that is checked to not ask Google to not index, you will get a much bolder warning than remembering that you have to go to reading and check that little box. I think Slim SEO does it. I think SEO Press does it.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that we like. There's also a flip side of this, which I literally dealt with yesterday, where I handed over a site quite a while ago, and they were on Flywheel, and then the people took it and they built a site on Wix. So then they changed the DNS, which we'll briefly talk about because there's a lot to talk about, to go to the Wix site. Never turned off the Flywheel site, even though the domain didn't go to it. Now it defaulted to the Flywheel default thing, but it was still indexing the pages.
Mm.
And literally, if you went and searched for this very, very specific and singular topic, something to do with local government, above the actual site that is the live site will be the old broken
Wow.
site that they forgot to turn off. So the one thing I did, I go, they still left that open.
Yeah.
I still had my admin to the old flywheel, and I went in and I did a whole site redirect, and I also checked the box to not index. But I said anything that comes to this site, redirect to the actual live site until, and I of course emailed them and said, you need to turn this off, and you're paying for it too.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
anyway,
Which another kind of verification one too sort of leads to this is also the sitemap as well.
Yep.
So, if you're using an SEO tool, and as Peter said, one at least that I use is SEO Press. Excuse me. Even I think the free version does include sitemaps. I kind of forget. So for some clients, I do the pro because that's all they need. For others, I do the free. But basically, the sitemap, depending on your tool that you're using, one of the things this SEO tool allows you to do is to control what you want to be indexed. So this varies. Again, I don't know if there's no hard and fast rules on this, but you definitely want posts and pages. But although if you don't have a blog, if it's just strictly a brochure site with 5 pages, maybe turn off posts for whatever reason. And some of these other things will be depending on your plugins. In this case, the events calendar will start throwing things out there like, I don't want venues indexed, maybe events you do want indexed, it's you decide. But the output of this is you do get a sitemap. So what is a sitemap? Sitemap is just an XML friendly representation of your website. So it'll have the things you chose, those taxonomies you said. So let's say poster pages. And this thing then gets submitted either manually or through your SEO plugin to Google and or other search engines so that they can easily crawl your site. So you just want to, again, if you're doing that, which it's so easy to just use an SEO plugin to do it, go through it first, make sure that everything's cool before you launch the site. You don't want to start changing things afterwards. Which then leads us finally, sorry, an hour later, to the actual launch. Okay.
Well, let's stop for a second.
Sure. I'm sorry.
I'm also going to propose that with the time and all, that maybe we do this in 2 parts.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, and I'll show you why. I want to show something as a review, and also kind of a little, what do you call it? The palette cleanser.
And that's totally good, Peter, because I think even like WordPress 7.0 next month will be, we'll see how much of that we get interested in. So if folks are okay with that, we'll do the actual, it's a cliffhanger. We'll do the actual launch piece.
Yeah.
For next time. But I do think there's still some missing things here too for pre-launch. So
100%.
So you want to probably cover, Peter, accessibility. I totally missed that. So what would you say from a pre-launch standpoint are some things that you need to do? And I could stop sharing if you want to. Maybe now's the time.
Yeah. Let me share, because I'm gonna you'll see what I'm going to show you in just a sec. All right, you see my screen?
Yep.
And we don't do slides until I ask AI to build slides for me. Now, it's cheating. A lot of human input to these things, including your content, my content, and content that we searched. Just for fun, this is the Gemini slideshow. This is the Perplexity slideshow. This is the ChatGPT slideshow. And this is the Claude slideshow. All of this is just straight HTML that I had to take a lot of the stuff. And we'll use it as a kind of, what did we miss over what we talked about? We don't have to go through this, each one, although I do want to show you it's kind of fun to see how slideshows are generated by these tools. So, navigation, this is all just one HTML file that the AI did. So, we started with that. The context is a new replacement, same are the domain changing, the staging, and we touched on this stuff kind of briefly. So some of this stuff maybe we even share and say, what would you like us to expand upon? The rollback plan, we kind of skipped the fact that other than having the backup and wait a minute, there's a panic. How do I get the thing back? One, you want to make sure you have it, and there's things you could do on that DNS thing, which maybe you're covering in the launch. The pre-flight, I think this was using some language that we had, which is, some of that.
Lorem ipsum, it's a good one too. Yeah, that's funny. So as we're wrapping up kind of thing too, these are like the gotchas. I did launch a site that later had some lorem ipsum stuff on it. That's funny.
100%, where all of a sudden you're like, and sometimes weirdly, those things seem to get you in things like hero sections because you used a pattern that had things like that. All of a sudden you had, so using some of the search and replace tools that allows you to search the content and go look for lorem ipsum or whatever you may have.
I mentioned, sorry, Peter, it jumped in my mind too. Another one around that too, that's a sneaky one. I didn't mention this as well, is testing your site. Again, this should all be caught in testing. Some of these things I know we're saying pre-launch, but especially testing your site on multiple devices, because
100%.
Especially some themes are pretty good at allowing you, like Cadence or even like Divi and other ones, to create multiple variations, content variations sometimes on mobile versus desktop. And that could be one that I think that's one that got me. I had a lorem ipsum on the mobile view of something. I was like, ooh, no, I caught it.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's so much that you can get kind of caught up in where you're so used to developing it, even in your own site and whatever place you're doing it, and it's working for you all the time. You got to remember what might be in cache, right? So the whole checking, clearing the cache, when you need to, what images are pulling from the development site versus the local site. A lot of things that happen to links, that's where the database cleanups are. Getting back to this slide is we're catching a lot of verify all menu footer links to it's funny what can get found in a footer that isn't working sometimes because it comes over a pattern and all. We talked about removing the unused plugins and themes and things like that you might have used during the development process. That admin hygiene is important. If you've got multiple people now, I see sites that are like that person stopped developing this site 8 years ago and they still have admin access because of them handling over. Let's quickly see where this
some of the stuff I think I cover. I cover that in the launch.
What you're covering. But let me since we'll probably do this in 2 points. This is the Perplexity one, and it's really doing it like for our meetup. Context decisions before launch. Let's see if there's anything new here. Finally, clean admin users confirm.
Integrations is kind of the follow-up things, but that's a big one too. Back to that whole making sure things are set up properly. So those are little gotchas too beyond paid licenses. Let's say that during testing, well, that's a good one too. During testing, if you're using, let's say, a Stripe, a whole separate thing. Let's say you're using like a Stripe or PayPal sandbox. You're ready to go live. Make sure you switch that to the proper thing. And
that's a great example. Let's look real fast at the Chat GPT one. This is how Chat GPT want to do the slides. They got fancy with the way they do slides and their navigation. Launch type, different variations of the type of thing. This is okay. Let's see if they add anything. Menus, plugins, themes, migration, verified. Not just. Sometimes you go through a when you're moving something over, and I know you're going to talk about this, where you go, oh great, it worked when it didn't. Something really important is not there. That database search and replace is part of what we're getting into. This one is Claude, and the navigation's down here. A different site gets really fancy, tiny writing, but I just wanted to show. I think the Gemini one is going to be the simplest to review, but I wanted to kind of go over that and have this kind of be our double check and new idea generation.
I like it.
You want to grab it back?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me share again. So just let me see what else I can fit into the because a lot of this might then go into our next phase. But Talk. So Peter, what I was going to say is talk a little bit about accessibility stuff.
Yeah.
That's a huge gap here. So whether that's maybe just talk about the process, the ideal process, if you will, of like accessibility things. When do you do that? Obviously, you do it as you're building the site, but are there any checks that you would do
Yeah.
pre-launch regarding accessibility?
Yeah, I'll grab the screen back. So I think one of the best, easiest things to do, and I say easiest, one is just get familiar with what the key points are. But as you're building the site, it's so much easier to do this. The first thing is when you first set up a site and you're like, say you're using a new theme or building a theme, there's so many things that if you do right out of the gate with the theme, half of your accessibility is taken care of. So checking color contrast, there's a lot of color contrast checking tools. A while ago, we had an accessibility presentation. We'll do more on that. But then a great thing that you could do is if you use, there's a couple now. There's another one that's come out, but under plugins, the one that I recommend that you install right as part of the build process is the accessibility checker by Equalize Digital, because then as you're building content, and this is all demo content on this particular site, if you're looking at a particular page, if it's active, as you're building it, you're going to get, go down to the bottom, you're going to get potential warnings here. And the new version is they've moved some of this over to the right side, which is good. You're going to get like, okay, hey, this page looks really good. What you also want to do, and I think this is kind of, again, in terms of the easiest way to keep track of something is on the front end, right? So I'm over here. Another nice thing is that that accessibility tool, the accessibility checker, that same plugin, they've added a year or so ago a front end tool where you can scan the page on the front end, which helps you as you're building. So it's much easier to do this as you go. Get your color contrast right. Make sure your text is readable. That's going to take care of other things. Know that as you're doing images to use proper alt text. That's going to be made easier with some of the AI stuff that's coming in. I can often use it. It's actually some of the stuff that's going to be built into WordPress going forward. There's an AI experiments plugin that shows you what they're looking to do, and one of the things is go generate me some alt text, which is really important. So a big part of accessibility is having the habit as you're building it. So much easier than going back and trying to fix it. But the other thing you could do is using the Wave extension for your browser, which will give you kind of an overview. Hey, you got 0 errors, 0 contrast errors. So if you're doing this as you're building, you can catch things right at the beginning, and it's going to save you so much time, which will then allow you to do something like this. And this is just while I'm on the accessibility topic, this is something that I just did for a site for a friend of mine, and we want, in terms of launching the privacy confidentiality terms of service, might talk about next time, but that accessibility statement, which should be important if you're actually doing a good attempt to do accessibility, and then creating an accessibility that statement that says, we're trying to do it, we're still improving. If we miss anything, let us know. If we're linking to third-party content, they're not accessible, that's not our responsibility, that type of thing. But this is important to kind of really manage that accessibility part in the easiest way as you're building the site, and then when you launch the site, making sure you take the time just to do that one page, that accessibility statement. I made this one using some existing content, but also using the AI tools that say, give me best practices for an accessibility statement for a site, and I give it context. It's a recruiting site, blah, 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 that type of thing. But number one rule with accessibility, get that foundation in place, colors, typography, things like that. Build off of that, know the things that you need to check. picking that, having a theme like a Cadence, like a Generate Press, and like an Astra that have paid attention to what you need for accessibility in terms of how navigation works, kind of makes that part automatic. But if you've got some obscure theme that doesn't do that, that as part of a rebuild, that's a great opportunity to fix that, to find something.
I like your point too about this isn't something you should just push aside to the end, like we talked about cleaning up post revisions. I mean, this ideally, especially if it's a focus or it's important to you and or the client, you want to do it as you're building the site, because you're right, because this is something I can see easily being dropped or put aside on priorities, because like we have so much other stuff to do to launch the site. It's like it becomes an afterthought. So you're right, it's good practice to do that.
And let's not forget, it's required.
Yeah,
it is a requirement to do this, and to then all of a sudden realize that like you've fallen short, somebody's calling on it, and now you got to pay somebody else to do some remediation, or you've got to now drop everything and do it. It's so much easier to do it as a matter of practice when you're building a new site.
Excuse me, Peter, what's required? Accessibility is.
So with accessibility, you have, I don't have all the, that's where, what's her name? There's a Feingold talks about all the legal cases that are out there about accessibility, but basically sites are supposed to be usable by anybody. We can go back to the whole
Are process. They saying WCAG 3?
No, not 3. 2 is a good target.
Wow.
Not 3.
Wow.
3 is like going the great, but
you going? Okay, I'll go with that. But are you including the new California laws about cookie? Okay, yeah. That's later. Okay,
yeah,
I'll be quiet.
That's later or next time. But talking about the issues around GDPR and California and when they apply and what you need to do. Again, these are all the things that's like, hey, isn't it great to launch a website? And it's like, yeah, but being on the web, there are certain requirements, and having a site be accessible, especially if there's a lot of these they're gray in that it's like, oh, it's the lawyers who are going after. Yeah, to some degree, but if Target is selling stuff, Target had a lawsuit years ago on this and was preventing, the site didn't allow a significant part of the population to use the site to purchase things. There are laws regarding that. Again, the easiest thing, just do it right. Oh, by the way, it's better for SEO. It's better for all users, things like that. So, that whole debate, like, oh, we got to go back and now think about accessibility. I just wish it was called best practices. And then, tools like this, the accessibility checker is the best practices checker, things like that. The UX checker, which is ultimately what it's all about, is the user interface and user design, UI, UX. But yeah, we can return back to the whole topic. I mean, that's why the
there's a lot. I mean,
day thing is 24 hours of presentations on the topic. But
I think this would be good to break up the WordPress 7.0 thing next time too. So
I like it. All right.
Well, I mean, we're getting to kind of wrap up point then too. So I will say again, kind of going back on this, and we'll share the slides. Again, if someone's in a hurry because you're launching soon, we'll put all this information on the Hartford WP website. And at least for me, a lot of this has changed over time. Again, I'm surely no expert in terms of super complicated deployments, but a lot of these best practices for me, some were hard learned. Some were, you learn when you break things, and I haven't broken many things as badly as I used to as I was learning. But
there are a lot of gotchas that when you do it enough times, like, and the tools that I use, I think, I don't know if we want to touch it all on the actual launch, but then some of the, like, the tool sets that I use and I've shown a number of times, the whole view DNS stuff that shows you.
Yeah, well, that's for next time. Yeah, we'll talk about that stuff too. Yeah, but those are things too, becoming aware of that stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, the whole thing of thinking about what could go wrong. Sometimes you don't know when you're beginning. It's like, oh, I know it.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know these MX records are. What are these things?
let's do this, because for one thing, so people want to see your notes, and then I'm going to put the slides. We'll spend time the next week getting all of this stuff in one area on the Hartford WP site, and we can share that out, which will prompt hopefully some questions or have people say, what are you interested in? Is there anything right now that people want to make sure we either cover a question now, or if there's any thing that you're dealing with now that that might be off topic but important to you now? Is there anything that you definitely want us to cover as part of this whole launch process?
If not, we'll cover it all.
Well, yeah. Wait till you go to slide
Launch
17 of my
checklist, yeah.
AI generated slideshow.
Yeah, the checklists are good. I mean, sometimes it's overkill, but it's I'd rather have a long checklist and be like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, than this something.
Well, and maybe that's one of the things I'll try to refine, and I'll share with you, which is I start off with like, make it an actual checklist. And some of this was like, would you like to make this a PDF? In fact, I have a PDF that is like a checklist, and say, is there some, general detailed, because every situation, checklists that at least could be kept in mind. Similar to, again, I think that tool that the website owner's manual, the reason they actually put a price tag on that and selling it was because it was just a thought out template where you filled in the blanks, and you could hand it and say, here's what it means to now own your website. Oh, by the way, do you want me to keep doing it for $100 a month or whatever you charge for your maintenance?
And it does help having, again, back to the analogy of actual launch, whether it's a spaceship or a plane or whatever, you do want to look and say, oh yeah, make sure all the knobs are turned, switches are turned, because you never know. So, all right. Well, I think next time we're going to have a lot. We're going to go WordPress 7.0. We'll touch on that. We probably skim over the collaboration things, because so that one maybe we'll put that back to our 2 hour instead of 90 minutes, because we'll have time for that, I think. So but sounds good. So we'll see everyone again next month, hopefully. And Peter, like I said, whenever the checklist is out, people can check it out, and
we'll share.
See everyone next time. All right, have a good one. See you guys.
Thanks guys.
Bye.
See you